to welcome. I want to welcome everyone to the Mandate with MaShani Allen. So glad to have you all on tonight. And for those who will be watching the replay, we have been studying pretty much the life of Jesus. We have been focused on his humility, but this week and last week and probably next week, we've actually been looking for Jesus in the Old Testament because he says that, in reading the scriptures, they testify of me. So I wanted to spend some time finding Jesus in the Old Testament. And last week we were able to find him in the story with Abraham and Isaac. And this week we are actually going to travel to the book of Daniel and find Jesus in Daniel. And it's interesting because these Bible studies, I'll just get like a download, I'll send myself a text, and that's what I end up talking about either that week or the week to come. And the story of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, which we find in Daniel chapter 3, it's what people consider, like a notable Bible story. You hear about it, in children's church growing up, different things like that. But I believe that there's something very, very significant that I was able to see, that I don't know if I had seen it before or even heard it discussed when it comes to the story about the Hebrew boys in the fiery furnace. And they're definitely, in my studying and in my research, there are different ideas of who is actually spoken about, but I believe that we shouldn't even fully focus just on who is talked about. But I think that there's a shadow there, in what was done in that miracle that we actually can see in the New Testament. And I don't know if that correlation has ever really been shared or established. So let us get started with this. And again, the bulk of our teaching today is going to come from Daniel chapter 3, where we find the story about the 3 Hebrew boys who end up being thrown into the fiery furnace. So the backdrop of this story is that the king at this time had erected or had this huge statue that was built, and he made it a decree that people would have to worship this idol anytime they heard the music play. And the Hebrew boys refused to worship the particular idol that he had created. And of course, there were people who snitched on them and caused them to be brought before the king. And the king is antagonizing them, trying to force them to worship what he had created. And we can pick up probably we'll pick up at verse, since this is a Bible study, we'll pick up on Daniel chapter 3, verse 12. It says, "There are certain Jews whom you have appointed and set over the affairs of the province of Babylon, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. These men, O king, pay no attention to you. They do not serve your gods or worship the golden image which you have set up." So the king is infuriated that there are people not only within his kingdom, but within his leadership who will not adhere to what he had commanded. So it says, Nebuchadnezzar in rage and fury commanded to bring Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, and they were brought before the king. And the king said to them, "Is it true, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, that you do not serve my gods or worship the golden image that I've set up?" He said, "If you're ready." So then he tried to make them do it, worship in front of him. And verse 16, they said, "It's not necessary for us to answer you on this point. If our God whom we serve is able to deliver us from the burning fiery furnace, he will deliver us out of your hands." So the king was like, "No one can deliver anybody out of my hands," just full of pride. And but then they said, "But if not, If not, let it be known to you, O king, that we will not serve your gods or worship the golden image which you have set up. So basically, they definitely knew that God could deliver. They didn't know if he would deliver, but either way, they refused to worship. So he was full of fury because they would not worship his idol. And what he did was he had the standard fiery furnace that the average person is thrown into. He had it heated up 7 times hotter than it had ever been, to the point that the people who threw Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego into the fire, they ended up dying because it was so hot that they died from the flames themselves, the people who he had to throw them in. So when we get to we'll go to verse 21. Then these 3 men were bound in their cloaks, their tunics or undergarments, their turbans, and their other clothing, and they were cast into the midst of the burning fiery furnace. Therefore, because the king's commandment was urgent and the furnace exceedingly hot, the flame and sparks from the fire killed those men who handled Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. And these 3 men, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, fell down, bound, into the burning fiery furnace. Then Nebuchadnezzar the king saw and was astounded, and he jumped up and said to his counselors, "Did we not cast 3 men bound into the midst of the fire?" They answered, "True, O king, O king." He answered, "Behold, I see 4 men loosed, walking in the midst of the fire, and they are not hurt. And the form of the fourth is like the Son of God." So here we literally have in the Old Testament Jesus coming down into a literal situation that is on fire. When we talk about scriptures about how he dwelt among us, this is one passage that I don't think people consider of him dwelling. But he literally came down and dwelt among the flames with Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. And what I love about this passage, it wasn't the men in the flames who said who he was. It was the people on the outside who were able to recognize the Son of God was in the midst. So then it says, so he's like, "I see 4." So then he came near to the mouth of the burning fiery furnace and said, "Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, you servants of the Most High God, come out and come here." Then Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego came out from the midst of the fire. And the satraps, the deputies, the governors, and the king's counselors gathered together and saw these men that the fire had no power upon their bodies, nor was their hair on their heads singed, neither were their garments scorched or changed in color or condition, nor had even the smell of smoke clung to them. And the verse that I love the most from this is actually found in verse 29. And it says, "Therefore, I make a decree that any people, nation, and language that speaks anything amiss against the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego shall be cut into pieces, and their houses made a dunghill." And this is the part, "For there is no other God who can deliver in this way." There is no other God who can deliver in this way. And the reason why, to me, that is so significant is when I was doing my research, I personally believe that that was Jesus. But when I look at some of the other commentaries, some people say because he said the word angel, that it wasn't actually Jesus. But when I looked up the Greek and the Hebrew word for that word son, um, I should say the Hebrew word, not the Greek, because this is Old Testament. That particular word son that Nebuchadnezzar uses, it means pure and chosen. And we know there was only one pure and chosen, and that is Jesus himself. So only Jesus could come down and deliver life like that. Only Jesus could come down and be acquainted with them in the midst of something so hot, something so technically torturous, and have them walking around. Now, in some of the research that I read, they said the reason why the king ended up responding to them is because they were singing in the flames, even though the this biblical account doesn't say that. They said that's what actually got his attention, because normally, a king would walk away because of course these people are going to die. But when he heard them singing in the flames, that's what made him to have to turn around and look. And then in doing so, he saw four instead of three. Now, what I love about this story is how it got Nebuchadnezzar's attention regarding who God was, and him understanding that there is a power much greater, and only one type of power could deliver people to this point. So it was only Jesus stepping in that allowed the three Hebrew boys to continue to have life. But I want us to also look at something in the New Testament, a connection that I saw that I never saw before, and I haven't heard taught. So when we look at Matthew 12 and 40, we have Jesus talking, and he's talking about what is about to happen. And he says, for as Jonas was 3 days and 3 nights in the whale's belly, so shall the Son of Man 3 days and 3 nights in the heart of the earth. And I believe that there's a parallel here, because when I went to look up what was the fiery furnace for the three Hebrew boys, a lot of people, or in the research, it says the fiery furnace was a pit. So just like Jesus came into the pit with the Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, the fullness of Jesus, I should say, went into the pit of the earth, because a furnace is carved out of the earth. So he met in both pits. He went to both pits. But there's something significant also in Matthew 27, 51 through 53. And I don't hear a lot of people talk about this verse, and it made me see something differently. In Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, they do all give accounts in regards to the resurrection, but all of them don't say the same thing. And the account that I'm about to share with you in Matthew is literally only found in Matthew, and there really isn't any other verbiage about this situation. But I think that it's significant to also a parallel of what we've just witnessed happen in the book of Daniel. So in Matthew chapter 27, verses 51 through 53, this again is talking about the death of Jesus, but listen to this. It says, and at once the curtain of the sanctuary of the temple was torn in two from top to bottom. The earth shook and the rocks were split. But listen to this. The tombs were opened, and many bodies of the saints who had fallen asleep in death were raised to life. And coming out of the tombs after his resurrection, they went into the holy city and appeared to many people. And when I look at those passages, as well as what happened with Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, only Jesus could bring that type of spectacle to the earth. When we read about Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, when you see all the people that were pretty much studying them as a result of Jesus coming into the midst of those flames, can you imagine the astonishment of those who not only had to come to the understanding that Jesus was resurrected, but he resurrected people as well, just like he bought and delivered the 3 Hebrew boys out of those flames. He delivered these people from death. Those who had believed and died in him were literally resurrected to life when he was resurrected. And a lot of times this verse isn't spoken of, but I think that there is a parallel from how we see him come down to the 3 Hebrew boys to how we see him come to earth and resurrect and bring other people with him, because they technically should have been dead, just like the people in the graves were dead. But when Jesus got in the midst of both of those situations, it was nothing but life. And it was a miracle, a spectacle. It was something to behold, and it was something that only God could deliver. Only God could do. When I looked at that word deliver, it means to extricate and to rescue. Those were both situations that only God could extricate 3 men from a burning furnace, and only Jesus could extricate people who were. And the thing is, we don't even know how long those people were dead. So just like the 3 Hebrew boys came out not smelling like smoke, I'm sure those who were raised to life with Christ came out not smelling like death. And Jesus was instrumental in both, the one in the old and the one in the new. Only Jesus could bring life. Only Jesus could rescue both of those parties, the Old Testament and the New. Only Jesus could do that. And I just think it's a beautiful way to see his delivering working power in the Old Testament as well as in the New Testament. I can't even begin to imagine what it must have been like to know you done buried your loved one. And here they are in town square because they were raised when Jesus was raised. How powerful is that? And again, Jesus was with the 3 Hebrew boys, and we don't even know how many people came back and were raised from the dead when he was raised from the dead. But I believe that it is significant, and I believe it's just another testimony and testament of us being able to see Jesus in the Old Testament and being able to see him in the New Testament. Again, I pray that this was enlightening to you, to be able to see Jesus in this way, to be able to see him in both aspects of the Bible, in the Old and in the New, and just to see him as one who rescues, and how he did it in both scenarios. And he when he got in the middle of it, it was a spectacle. And like I said, in Daniel, I just love the way, hold on. I just love the way that the king responds in the fact that he says, and again, this is a heathen king. He says, there is no other God. There is no other God who can deliver in this way. And this is the Jesus that we serve. I pray that you all were blessed by this teaching. If you ever want to join the conversation afterwards, just join the Facebook group, The Mandate with MaShani Allen, and you can always be a part of our conversation afterward and our Q&A. Be blessed, and I will see you next week.